Often referred to as the fifth element of hip-hop, rhythmic vocalization, also known as beatboxing, has been incorporated into countless genres throughout the world. But where did it start? You see, it becomes quite difficult to define that because it depends what you define beatboxing as. Because if we just look at it as creating music with our mouths, then it's been around as long as human existence. It's been incorporated into traditional African music, as well as Native American and tube and throat singing. Additionally, and rather weirdly, it's incorporated in a style that's popular in the southern states of the US, called the eefing. It's a rather strange technique, to say the least. But the first time that we are able to see it in the way that it's used today is when artists started to emulate the sounds of a TR-808. This is a Roland device that's a drum machine. We've actually spoken about it on previous episodes. And what happened was the likes of Dougie Fresh, as well as Wise, and a couple of other artists started to push forward with these techniques of creating these sounds with their mouths. Now, fast forward a couple of years and we introduce onto the scene a gent by the name of Razel. He was able to sing and beatbox at the same time, and suddenly the world went crazy because it meant that there was another element that could be added into this. Now, since then, a lot of artists have pushed it even further by adding techniques that include the likes of trumpet sound effects, bass, as well as other elements that stack up to add a more fuller sound. So while we've all attempted to beatbox, what would it take to go from sounding like this to sounding like this? We were interested in finding out, and for this reason, we got in touch with someone who's been in the game for over a decade and a half. Morgan Beatbox is an internationally renowned vocal percussionist who's won the South African Beatbox Championships multiple times. And for this reason, we wanted to get him in and find out how exactly does one go about starting.
I would have to say that the basics of beatboxing, and in fact the basics of music, is a kick drum, a hi-hat, and a snare. That is the basics of music. Okay, so with beatboxing, the first thing you're going to learn is going to be the kick drum. And the kick drum, if I could try explain it as basically as possible, is creating pressure in your mouth very quickly and releasing it just as quickly. Okay, we move on to the hi-hat now. That's also quite simple. It's also a quick build-up of pressure and a release. Okay, when we go to the snare, there's a lot of snares that beatboxers do, but the most basic one is called a PF snare.
A drummer has the ability to be able to play multiple sounds at the same time because quite obviously they've got two hands. But the problem with beatboxing is you've only got one mouth. So how do artists get around this and be able to achieve multiple sounds at the same time to create one cohesive pattern?
You have to have a great amount of coordination to beatbox, especially layering sounds. You know, if you're just beatboxing and not layering sounds, you just have to be in time. That's all you got to be is in time. But if you've got a complex bass pattern going, it gets more complicated when you go because now I've got to, I've got to know that I've got to put two in between each kick and snare. It gets hectic in the mind. A lot of the times when I'm performing, people will see me with my eyes closed. And that's because I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm doing.
One of the techniques needed for beatboxing is, of course, breath control. Because while you're trying to get that beat out, if you run out of breath to push through your vocal cords, you run out of drum beat. So for this reason, I was interested in finding out what it takes to actually control your breath and make sure that you can keep it going for a consistent length of time.
A lot of the sounds are outwards and a lot of the sounds are inwards. Okay, and a lot of the sounds are neither. Okay, so when building a beat, what I would do is if on the first kick was a big bass line, and let's say that bass line was inward, for example, okay, now the snare has got to be something outward. I have to now get rid of that air that I've just pulled into my lungs. Lungs are full, I need to, I'm beatboxing there, but I'm also breathing. I'm going, Okay? The same goes with, if I'm doing my first sound outwards, it'll be, now I'm out of breath. I can't do an outward snare. It doesn't sound powerful, and I'm losing my breath now. So if my first sound is outward, the snare would then be inward.
So while you might have started off by saying the phrase boots and cats and thought that was beatboxing, as you can hear, there's a lot more difficulty to this technique than meets the eye, and that's exactly why artists who perform in this take years to develop not only their own style, but also master the various techniques. For the secrets behind the sounds that you love, for Backbeat, I'm DJ Flax.